first of all, I'd like to make absolutely clear that these were provided to me as a loaner, review loaner from a representative or a redistributor or some guy in the UK on behalf of Me Audio for review. I'm going to be mailing it back to them after this. I've had these for a few weeks now. So thank you to them for doing that, because usually I have to buy everything that I review and it can get absurdly pricey even if I keep buying and selling. The total amount of money I can spend on that just lowers every time I do that. So yeah, so first of all, Me Audio, who are they? I didn't know who they were before I got this product. I asked around and people said, "Oh, they kind of make budget stuff," and I thought, okay, but I heard their Pinnacle P1 IEM is pretty good. It's their first foray into high-end audio or something. So I looked at the price point. It's $199. So definitely not a budget item. So when I received this in the mail, just first impressions, I gotta admit, I really like the packaging. And I know it's a really basic thing to talk about, but yeah, I mean, it's full of like all the information you basically need. But never mind just the information, it's just how it opens up. So this right here is what you see when you open it. Now I love how it's presented, like in a way, like you have the cables and accessories in this box that comes out. You have an absurd amount of air tips. Now, I'm not sure what the protocol is here, because I'm not really much of an IEM guy. I've been reviewing full-size headphones mostly. So, is it normal for IEMs to come with like, well, I'll just show it to you. Is it normal for IEMs to come with like this many air tips? Because I'm using these two, right? And there's so many more, which is great because I found that changing the air tips can really like change the sound quite a bit. So I'm glad they provide this many options, because I'm pretty sure this can do something that this can't for certain genres, but I like this one overall, but we'll get to that. So yeah, you get all these air tips, this to the side, and you got a little carrying case made of leather, pleather, I'm not sure. It's pretty good, pretty decent. You have the manual, and most importantly you have the 1/4 inch adapter. Now the reason that's important is because of amping, and I will also get into that as I unfold this review. Let me just put the box to the side. Alright, so the earphones themselves are right here. Now the first thing you'll notice is that these are made of metal. I looked it up, something like a zinc alloy, I'm not sure, but basically these are metal shells. Now, I'm so used to like, I've seen like wooden shells which are really like luxurious and high end, and I've seen like plastic shells mostly. So a metal shell really caught my attention. I'm not sure how much it picks up on the camera, but it has a nice metal, brushed metal finish to it. You'll be able to see it better in the photos I put up in my written review, which should be linked below. So let me just pop this off right now, just for clarification. This is what it looks like. Now the first thing I really liked about these is, just like with headphones, I enjoy it when something has detachable cables. So for like a $200 item, you do want to protect it somehow so it doesn't get yanked around, doesn't have any kind of driver defects because of how you treat it. Well, these come right off. Now again, I'm not an IEM guy, so this kind of surprised me. I'm like, whoa, I'm carrying this around in my hand. It's a little heavy too, but we'll get to that. So this is pretty impressive to me. Pretty basic to some people watching, I'm pretty sure. But this also gives you they give you two cables, right? The one I've been using, this one, is a silver-plated copper cable. Something like 99.9% copper, I'm not sure what exactly. But silver-plated. And you have, this is a neck adjustment, which is good. And this is the other one they give. And this one, I'm not sure what the specs are, but I'll just say it's black. and it has a microphone and remote button on it, which really confuses me because I can't imagine someone actually using this with their phone. Anyone who knows how headphones or earphones should be driven would probably not use these on their phone. So, but it's good that they give that as an option. I'm not sure how exactly it works. Maybe it goes through the amp, the signal. I'm not sure. But let me just connect this again. Now, the first thing about the cable I like to talk about is that even though it looks quite nice and it is quite very sturdy, like this, compared to like, especially the Zero Audio Carbo Tenore, which used to be my favorite IEMs, the cable just frayed over time and it stopped working. It had a really thin, really flimsy cable. I'm glad for 199 they're giving you something decent here. However, it is a bit heavy. Just as a cable, it's a little heavier than what I'm used to in cables. And also, this thing tangles so easily because of this reason. Because it's just, like, look at that. Like, I could leave these on their own, and I'll come back and it's all tangled. I don't even want to untangle this right now, but... Okay, I'll just try a little bit. Alright. Oh, I managed. So, these get quite easily tangled, but they're very sturdy. However, both the cables, first of all, just to clarify, there's no sound difference between the two. I've A-B'd them, nothing. You're not gonna, it's not because this one's silver plated and the other one isn't that you're gonna hear a sound difference, because there isn't. And this cable, it has, both of them, have slight microphonics. Usually if something touches around this area, there's a low-end microphonic sound, which, even though it's slightly disappointing, it's not too bad, so I can't fault it too much. Otherwise, it's quite sturdy and quite clean. So the comfort. I find these to be very, very comfortable earphones, whatever. The reason for that is, even though they look a little heavy, and they are quite heavy, but once you put them in your ear, and you do that whole thing where you twist it around and you insert it, and you point it upwards, it kind of just feels effortless, which I'm very glad of, because I love it when headphones just feel effortless in your ear or on your head. And I've had these on for hours and hours, no problems with fatigue or anything like that. So quite happy with the comfort of these. Your mileage may vary. Thankfully, like I said, they have a lot of tip options. So if this is too thick, this is this is the biggest one they have. This is a compli tip, the largest one. That's what I use. I feel that this gives the best seal and the best sound reproduction to me. So yeah, but if you want the smaller ones, go for it. That's the variable nature of IEMs, I guess, is that you can fit them on any kind of air. But anyways, very comfortable, and yeah. So let's talk about the sound now. The sound of these is not what I'm usually drawn to. The sound of these is what I'm usually drawn to. I'll just be completely honest. Is something that's more warm and a bit more bassy. Because these, they don't have an insane amount of bass. What these do, like let's start with the sub bass. The sub bass extension on these does not go that low. It goes lower than usual if you use the compli tips, but it doesn't go as low as even the Shozy Zero, which I reviewed a few months back. Even that has more sub bass in this. That has more bass overall. In fact, that's what I would call a bassy earphone, but this has a very, doesn't extend that low, and the mid bass is not much mid bass either, so it's very, very muted in the bass department. However, it has a good amount of texture to it. It has a good amount of, even though it doesn't go that low, it goes to a level where, unless you're listening to some genres where you absolutely require a ton of bass for enjoyment, you're not going to be left too wanting if you want a clean sound overall, because that's what these do provide, a very good clean sound overall. If you move to the mids, obviously if there's not much mid bass, there's not much bleed into the mids, so these do not bleed much into the mids at all. In fact, I would say the mids are very clean. The mids have a very nice texture to them, and they're quite detailed. They're not as insanely detailed as like when I listened to the Noble Audio Katana back when I was at CanJam for like a few minutes. 10-15 minutes. These aren't that detailed, but then again, that's in the thousands range, so these aren't really trying to compete with that. But what these are trying to do is give you a very good sense of detail in your music. Now, the mid range, let me give you an example of what I meant by texture. If you're listening to, let's say, an acoustic guitar, which I usually use to test out different audio gear and headphones, is I like listening to acoustic guitar strumming and picking to see how it reproduces those sounds. The way this does them is that they don't have that realistic lower mid hump, which the Omni used to have, or the Omni that I used to have has, and it doesn't have that thing where it gives you like the full live sound of a strum, but it does give you a very good detail sound in the plucking and the highs, and a decent amount of body in the lower notes too. So it's very good for very good for acoustic guitars. Not the best, but pretty good. But where it really shines is with the electric guitar. Now, I mentioned this in my written review as well, but if you are a guitar player, you will notice that how the guitar sounds out of your amplifier sounds quite different than what it does on, let's say, lower quality headphones that tend to smooth over things like the aggressive sound of a distorted guitar. These reproduce electric guitars quite well. There's no sense of okay, it's taming some edge. There's no edge taming, and this is actually a really good sound. If you're listening to metal music, the riffs will ring out in a very nice way, a very live way, which is a great thing if you're listening to more aggressive music. All the jagged edges and the imperfections of the amplifier will be there, and you can hear that, which is I think is a great thing. Similarly with jazz music and classical music, the separation is extremely good. You will hear all the instruments just okay. First of all, the soundstage is very good, but it's not amazing. I would actually compare the soundstage to like the Alaire or the HD600. But what it does is it has a lot of room for the instruments to situate, and the separation is very good. What also this means is that because of, like, let me give you an example of classical music. If you're listening to an orchestra, you will hear a good amount of bite to the stringed instruments as well, which is similar to the electric guitars. Those can be quite smooth over. Like, I'll give you an example. I tried listening to an orchestra with the LCD-X, and I didn't hear the bite in the strings at all. So the upper mids are quite, they're okay in this, but I must say overall, one thing for certain, first of all, I mentioned my biases are like a slightly mid-forwarded sound. These don't have that. These have recessed mids in a way. What these do is I will compare them a little bit to the HD800, which is insane because of the price and how the form factor and everything. But what the HD800 does is it has very high quality clean mids, but they back off. Like if there are some headphones like the Omni which push the mids over here, the HD800's mids are back here. You can hear the detail, but they don't overstay anything. They don't even intrude. They just sit at the back and reproduce the audio in a certain way, and it can leave you feeling wanting. If you want more lush vocal sounds, you're not going to get that from these earphones at all. These earphones, vocals on these earphones sound a little subdued, especially if the track you're listening to has a lot of stuff going on. If it's a very hectic track, if you're listening to, okay, male vocals are still better off than the female vocals because those can get quite drowned out in a song with a lot of instruments and stuff being layered on top of each other. And you will hear, in those cases, you'll probably hear the guitars and the drums, and if there's a synthesizer especially, it's going to intrude on the space where the vocals are. So keep that in mind. These are slightly mid recessed. Very clean, very clear mids, but they're slightly recessed. So I wouldn't go all out and call them a V-shaped sound signature though, but maybe slightly, because I have noticed that in lots of IEMs that I've tried, in the higher ranges, not the ones you use on your iPhone, what happens is they tend to have a slightly mid-recessed sound. I'm not sure if that's to make it so it sounds clean to the listener because of the small driver form factor. I'm not sure. I'm not an engineer. I also don't know really much of the difference between balanced armature and these, which are not balanced. By the way, these are just the standard dynamic coil drivers, whatever. So I'm not sure. Do they do it on purpose so they can have a cleaner sound? I'm not sure. But what I can say is that it is clean. It's not my preference in the mids at all, but it's very clean. Now the treble. The treble is it just it there's a good amount of jump in the treble where it doesn't quite reach the problematic region of, like, let's say an unmodified HD 800, but it does have a jump to it. Now the jump which I'm trying to explain here is it can get a little peaky at times. Now the peakiness is tamed by these compli tips. These compli tips, they give a little more body to the low end, and they tame the highs a bit. So this is pretty much, if I had to listen to these every day, this is what I would choose. But if you want more air, even though these provide a good amount of air, if you want more air on your stringed instruments and everything, then let's talk about some of the other air tips briefly before I get back to the treble. Alright, now this one I found especially good for classical music. Now, something like this, the first time I put these on, I was like, these just go way deep in your air. Like, who would be comfortable with this? I mean, I can't really get used to these, but they do provide a good amount of treble. But they also provide some sibilance if you're listening to more processed genres like electropop. So I really, really would not recommend them with that. But for classical, these are really good. And of course, you have the double ones. Those are the triples. These are double. You have just standard silicon tips. So all of these would be those silicon tips would all be very good for classical genres where you need more air around your instruments, stuff where you really want to hear the slight shrillness, realistic shrillness of a violin. Whereas the compli tabs are more for easy listening and for everyday use. That is what I would recommend with these, because the treble can get quite peaky if you are using the standard silicon tips. But when I say peaky, I don't mean like it's a deal breaker. I mean it's kind of like unless you're very treble sensitive, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, because the treble is quite detailed. It doesn't do what the AC800 does sometimes, where it'll take, like, if there's a symbol that sits right on the frequency response where it's emphasized, that symbol will just take over the song and drown out some 2 or 3 other instruments. It's not going to be like that, but it can get a little peaky. So I would recommend, if you're going to get these, use the compli tabs. Most of the tips. Most of the time, these will do the job. And these will still provide a good amount of air, but a more reserved and more polite sounding experience. So, overall, what would I rate these? I gotta admit, I was quite impressed with these. My experience with IEMs is that I've realized that the higher up the prices go, there tends to be this emphasis on detail and because of that detail and shrillness. The shrillness happens because they want more detail and more treble packed in. So the treble forwarded sound can get really harsh at times, but some people prefer that. I don't prefer that. I'm just going to say that outright. But this, I can get along with. I can get along with how this handles treble, even with the other tips compared to the compli ones. Even with those, I can get along with it because these have a very good sound overall. It's very nice. It's very it's musical, but it's analytical, and it's very. No, I'm not gonna say balanced because it's not flat, but it is kind of balanced. Yeah. Okay, maybe sometimes you might miss the vocals a little bit in the songs you're listening to, but the instrumentals will sound really good on these. In fact, I would actually say instrumentals on these sound just, if you're listening to instrumental music on these, that would be the most ideal setup, in my opinion. Now, just to quickly touch on amping, because these are 50 ohms, but their sensitivity is quite low compared to most other portable audio, so you'll need to have an amp for these. Using them with a cell phone just won't be enough, trust me on that much. So what I would recommend is you grab yourself well, I've been using it with all my amp sources. I have 3 amps currently. I use it with the Shit Magni 2, which I found quite good. I use it with the Cavalli Liquid Carbon, which has a warmer tinge to it, so I like how it colors the sound just a little bit in that regard. But that also has an issue with like this first run standard SE output having a bit of a hum issue, so I don't really use it on that so much. What I did like though was this setup. This is the Abasso DX80 connected to a VE Runabout Plus. I did like this pairing quite a bit. Um, I'm not going to extol too much about this because now that I'm affiliated with VE, I'll just make it completely clear. I'm affiliated with VE, so I'm not going to outright recommend using this, but I like it with this. That's all I'm going to say. So, they need to be driven. They have a good look to them, good durable look to them, high quality metal, a good amount of air tips, good packaging, good cable with just slight microphonics. You have this overall very nice sound, very polite sound compared to a lot of other IEMs that I've listened to. So I can dig these. And I would recommend them, but keep in mind everything that I've mentioned in this review. I would recommend these if you can. If those things do not sound bad to you, I would highly recommend these because I do believe, and from what I've talked to others and they've told me, people who are more into IEMs have told me that in the IEM world, these have done exceptionally well in the price to performance ratio. So if they have high praise for it, that's pretty good. I would recommend checking out other reviews from people who are more attuned to listening to IEMs because there's the whole separation of the markets is you have the headphone guys, you have the portable headphones on air guys, then you have the IEM guys, and then you have the earbud guys, and etc. and all that. So I'm not much of an IEM guy, but I do like how these sound. But if you want to have better comparisons, if you want to have more vast knowledge of IEMs and their whole technology and how to get it by, I would recommend you try someone else out as well. Don't just take my word for it. But overall, I like the sound. I would recommend it for $199 definitely. I would recommend that you try them somehow. If you're going to like a headphone meet and someone has these, do awesome if you can try them out. So yeah, they receive a recommendation from me. Thank you to Me Audio for providing me with this review loaner. I'm going to get these packed up and shipped back to you guys. And yeah, thank you for watching. That's been my review.